That smell was a sweet torture. Grilled meat and rendered fat, lingering in the early morning city breeze, pulling the dog from a fitful sleep beneath an azalea bush. His stomach cramped. He had no name, only survival instincts honed over hundreds of days of roaming. Creeping toward the alley behind a diner, he spotted a treasure, bulging trash bags. But just as his snout touched the plastic, a steel door burst open. "Hey, get out of here!" A burly chef, his apron stained with grease, lunged out with a long-handled broom. He swung hard. The handle smacked against the concrete, grazing the dog's front paw. He didn't growl. He didn't bare his teeth to defend his food. He simply cowered, tucked his tail tightly between his legs, turned, and shot off like an arrow. Running away was the one thing he did perfectly. As his paw pads slapped against the cold asphalt, a dark memory rushed back, squeezing his heart. It was a sunny, late summer day. He was only 6 months old then, sitting in the back seat of a family car, eagerly sticking his head out the window to catch the wind. He thought they were going on a picnic. The car stopped on a deserted dirt road, far from the city. The man opened the door and hurled an old tennis ball deep into the tall grass. "Fetch, boy!" he barked joyfully, sprinting with all the speed of a puppy. When he clamped down on the ball, tail wagging frantically, he turned around. The car had already turned around. The engine roared deafeningly. The vehicle sped off, leaving behind a cloud of blinding dust. He dropped the ball and chased after it in a panic. He ran and ran, barking until his throat went hoarse, running until his paw pads bled and the pitch-black night crashed down, swallowing him whole. The betrayal of that day etched an ironclad rule into his DNA, a shackle of survival. Never trust humans. They might pet you today, but they'll throw you away tomorrow. It's best to keep your distance. Sprinting desperately past 2 city blocks, the dog slipped into the shadows of Central Park. This was his territory, a place vast enough to hide from hateful stares and crowded enough to hope for scattered breadcrumbs. And here, there was a single exception to his rule of survival: an old woman. He had first noticed her last autumn. She always appeared at the exact same time, 3:30 p.m. every day. She wore frayed but neat gray wool coats, wrapped in a simple scarf, walking slowly with a faded leather handbag. She never tried to call him over. No clicking her tongue, no whistling, no using those fake sounds humans make to coax animals. She simply walked to a wooden bench under an old oak tree in the most secluded part of the park, sat down, and pulled a piece of stale rye bread from her bag. She slowly broke it into small crumbs, placing them on the grass in front of her. "For you, if you want it," she would murmur, her voice as thin, dry, and sorrowful as the rustling of dead leaves. For months, the dog only dared to watch from afar, hiding behind a thick bush. Only when she was completely out of sight would he creep forward to eat. But her silence, patience, and consistency gradually eroded the wall of caution inside him. There were no kicks, no shouting. Slowly, he began to inch closer. Today was no different. When the old woman arrived and sat down, the dog was already waiting, just 10 feet away. This distance was far for a human, but for an abandoned dog, it was a leap of courage. The old woman dropped the crumbs. The dog gave his tail a slight wag and lowered his head to eat. Between these two lonely creatures existed an unspoken treaty. I won't bother you, and you won't hurt me. Just a shared, quiet stillness. But that afternoon, the New York sky changed abruptly. The sun set faster than usual, staining the horizon a deep orange mixed with a bruised purple. The light of the golden hour poured over the grass, brilliantly beautiful, but carrying a biting north wind that signaled the impending night. The air grew visibly colder. Picnicking families and joggers began to hurriedly leave the park, leaving behind an eerily silent space. The old woman leaned heavily on the armrest, shakily standing up, preparing to leave as always. Suddenly, her body seized up. She reached up, clutching her left chest, where her gray wool coat bunched beneath her gnarled fingers. Her breathing turned rapid, whistling through her teeth. She stumbled a step, reaching out as if to grasp the empty air, and collapsed onto the cold ground, lying motionless. Her handbag spilled open, the last crumbs of bread scattered across the grass. The dog jumped back, the hair on his neck standing up. He perked his ears, waiting for the old woman to rise. But 1 minute, then 2, passed. The motionless silence of this woman was wrong. It defied all daily routines. He cautiously took tiny steps closer, letting out a low whine in his throat, a high-pitched sound of unease. He lowered his head, pressing his wet snout against her wrinkled cheek. There was no warmth. The familiar scent of old wool and rye was now crushed by a sour, cold odor, the scent of illness, of the boundary between life and death. The light was dying out. Darkness began to crawl from the roots of the ancient trees, thick and threatening. Wild instincts screamed at the dog to leave. Night was when other predators emerged. He couldn't stay in this open space. But something greater than his survival instinct tethered him there. The memory of the breadcrumbs. The only gentle voice he had heard in years. The dog lifted his head and scanned the surroundings. The woods were deserted. He spun around and shot like a bolt of lightning toward the park's main paved path. He ran frantically toward the exit, where the amber glow of streetlights was just flickering on. Ahead, a man in expensive athletic gear was jogging, wearing noise-canceling headphones. The dog lunged after him, letting out a sharp bark and gently nipping at his pant leg, trying to pull him back. The man stumbled in surprise, hurriedly yanking out one earbud. "What the hell? Get away, you filthy mutt!" He kicked his leg forward hard. The dog dodged, but the kick threw him off balance. The man grumbled in annoyance and sped up, disappearing into the dark. He didn't give up. Panic began to surge through his veins. He ran to a couple hurriedly folding a blanket and packing their things. "It's getting dark, and it's freezing. Let's go," the woman said, zipping up her coat. The dog rushed up, barking loudly in front of them, then backed up 2 steps, looking back toward the oak grove, begging them to follow. "Honey, does it have rabies? Chase it away," the woman recoiled in terror. The man picked up a dry branch from the ground, swinging it threateningly. "Shoo, get out of here!" They quickly walked straight toward the main gates, never looking back. He continued his dash to a nearby stone bench, where 3 teenagers were smoking, a heavy bass line thumping from a Bluetooth speaker. The darkness made them bold and callous. The dog unleashed long volleys of desperate barks. A guy laughed raucously, chucking a half-full aluminum beer can right at him. "Get lost, you crazy mutt!" The can slammed into the dog's ribs, cold beer splashing his shivering coat. He yelped in pain, backing away, his tail clamped tightly between his legs again. The fear of humanity flared up, tearing at the image of the old woman lying collapsed beneath the oak tree. The park was now almost completely submerged in darkness. Only the faint glow of distant floodlights remained. Despair welled up, choking the dog's throat. He ran in circles on the empty path, his barks turning hoarse, shattered, and utterly lost. No one understood him. Not a single person in this human world would stop. They were too busy with their own warm, comfortable lives. Until, at the edge of the darkest part of the lawn, near the public trash cans, he saw a small silhouette. It was a young girl. She wore an oversized, frayed military jacket, hunched over a trash can, picking out empty aluminum cans and dropping them into a large woven sack. Her hair was matted with sweat, hidden beneath a pulled-down black beanie. When the dog's panic bark shattered the silence, the girl didn't jump and run away, nor did she look for something to throw at him. People living at the bottom of society aren't easily startled by the sounds of misery. She stopped what she was doing and slowly lifted her head. The dog rushed toward her, but braked hard, keeping a safe distance. Under the sallow light spilling from a distant street lamp, the girl squinted. She saw the trembling of his body, his wet fur, and above all, his eyes. It wasn't the aggressive glare of a rabid animal, nor the begging gaze of a hungry stray. It was the desperate plea of someone standing at the edge of an abyss. He let out a sharp bark, snapped his head to stare intensely into the dark, deep oak woods. Then he looked back at her, his body taut as a bowstring. He took a step forward, then backed up, repeating the head turn a second time. A clear, desperate invitation. The girl frowned. The night wind began to howl, biting cold. Walking away was the safest option. But a person like her, 19 years of life kicked around between foster homes before being dumped onto the streets on her 18th birthday, she was used to being ignored by the entire world. Because of that, she possessed an ability the joggers, the couples, and the teenagers lacked. She could hear the sounds of brokenness. She tossed the aluminum can in her hand into the sack. "You want me to follow you?" Katie's voice rasped, muffled by the cold. The dog gave a single slight wag of his tail, then immediately turned and ran 3 paces, looking back, waiting. Katie sighed, pulling a battered phone from her jacket pocket, its screen spiderwebbed with cracks. The top right corner glowed a harsh red, 3% battery. She flicked on the flashlight feature, a weak white beam piercing the night. "All right, lead the way, kid." She abandoned her sack of cans, her only asset to trade for tomorrow's meal, and ran after the dog. He led her off the paved path, plunging into rough trails buried in dead leaves. The deeper they went, the thicker the darkness became. The flickering flashlight beam swept across giant tree trunks. Finally, the dog stopped. Katie's light hit a figure curled up, motionless on the dew-soaked grass. "Oh my God!" Katie sprinted over, dropping to her knees. She rolled the woman onto her back. The old woman's face was waxen, her lips a bruised purple. Katie pressed 2 fingers against her neck. The pulse was incredibly weak and erratic. Her skin was ice cold. With trembling hands, Katie immediately dialed 911. The long dial tone echoing in the dark was chilling. 911, what is your emergency? A female dispatcher's voice rang out. There's an elderly woman collapsed. Her heart is barely beating. In Central Park, by the old oak grove, behind Bethesda Terrace. Hurry, please hurry, Katie yelled, her breath pluming in white clouds. Calm down, ma'am. What is your exact location? It is very dark. The rescue team needs clear coordinates. Are you intoxicated? The dispatcher's voice carried a hint of suspicion upon hearing Katie's trembling, somewhat panicked and rough tone. I'm not drunk. I don't know any damn coordinates. Just go straight from the fountain into the woods. You have to use flashlights to find us. My phone battery is about to... The phone screen went black. The battery had died. Damn it, Katie swore, tossing the phone aside. She looked at the old woman slipping closer to death. The wind whipped past, making Katie's teeth chatter. Without hesitating another second, she stripped off her thick military jacket, her only shield against the sub-zero chill, and draped it over the old woman. She was left wearing only a thin t-shirt. Katie furiously rubbed the woman's icy hands, trying to transfer whatever little warmth she had. Right beside her, the dog slumped down, his eyes wide open, silently standing guard in the dark. Every so often, he would reach out and gently lick the old woman's forehead. 15 minutes later, 15 minutes that felt like a century as the bone-chilling cold tore at Katie's skin. Blinding beams of flashlights from the paramedic team finally swept through the oak trees. "Over here! We're over here!" Katie screamed until her voice cracked. 3 paramedics carrying a stretcher and trauma bags rushed over. But when a burly EMT saw Katie's disheveled, ragged appearance huddled over a well-dressed old woman, he frowned, raising a hand and shoving her back roughly. "Back away! What the hell are you doing to her? Going through her purse?" Pushed off balance, Katie tumbled onto the grass. Instantly, the dog lunged from the shadows, baring his teeth and growling fiercely, placing himself between Katie and the paramedic. "Hold on, Jack! Watch out for the rabid dog!" another EMT yelled, pulling out a heavy flashlight defensively. "I wasn't rummaging through anything, you bastard!" Katie scrambled up, screaming furiously, her teeth chattering violently from the cold. Her pulse is under 40 beats a minute. Her lips are cyanotic, extremities are cold. She's having a heart attack or something. Just save her instead of standing there accusing me." Katie's assertiveness and accurate medical terminology made the medical team freeze for a second. They immediately sprang into action, starting an IV line and lifting the old woman onto the stretcher. No one asked about Katie. They hastily pushed the stretcher toward the flashing red and blue lights of the ambulance parked on the main road. As the rig wailed and sped off, carrying away the woman's life, it left the woods in a dead, suffocating silence. Katie stood alone in the dark, hugging her violently shivering arms. Her jacket had gone with the old woman in the ambulance. At her feet, the old woman's leather handbag lay forgotten. No one had bothered to grab it. She bent down, picked it up, along with her shattered phone. The dog gently nudged his head against her pant leg. Katie looked down at him. "You did real good, kid," she whispered, then turned and walked away into the freezing New York night. 4 days later, a sleek, luxurious black Lincoln sedan glided through the cramped, trash-littered streets of the Bronx and stopped in front of a dilapidated apartment building where the paint was peeling off in large patches like scabs. A middle-aged man in a flawlessly tailored suit stepped out, grimacing at the stench of urine from a nearby dumpster. He followed an address, knocking on a dark room at the end of a third-floor hallway. The door cracked open. Katie peeked out, her eyes full of caution. She was still wearing the same ragged clothes, dark circles under her eyes. "You are Katie, correct?" the man asked, his voice cold and professional. "The one who called the ambulance in the park 4 nights ago? We found your phone number logged in the police 911 records and traced the ping to this address." Katie nodded slowly. "I am the legal representative for Mrs. Eleanor Vance. She wishes to see you. Please come with me." An hour later, Katie found herself standing outside a VIP suite at Mount Sinai Hospital, the most expensive private hospital in the city. The room was as massive as a high-end apartment, overflowing with expensive floral arrangements and terrifyingly quiet. On a pristine white bed, the woman Katie had thought was a destitute old lady was sitting propped up against pillows. Though she was pale and breathing through a nasal cannula, her regal, elegant aura was impossible to hide. The old woman, Eleanor Vance, smiled weakly when Katie walked in, carrying the worn leather handbag. "The police told me a homeless girl without a coat argued with the paramedics in the freezing cold to protect me," Eleanor spoke, her voice still as soft as when she spoke to the dog. "I owe you my life." Katie stood awkwardly at the foot of the bed, placing the handbag on a table. "Your bag fell at the scene. I didn't take anything from it. And no, it wasn't me who saved you. It was that stray dog. He ran to find help. He refused to give up. He got kicked, had cans thrown at him, but he still led me to you." Eleanor nodded slightly, her eyes growing distant and sorrowful. "I know, but out of the hundreds of people who passed through the park that night, he chose you. And you, despite having nothing, chose to stop, even giving up your only coat. Why do you think that is?" Katie stayed silent. She lowered her head, hiding her rough, calloused hands in her pockets. Eleanor pointed to the frayed backpack Katie was wearing. From the top zipper, the corner of a sketchbook poked out. "May I see that sketchbook?" Katie hesitated for a second. It was her only private world. But then, something in Eleanor's eyes made her yield. She pulled the book out and handed it to the woman. Eleanor put on her reading glasses, slowly turning each page. Inside were no beautiful landscapes or vibrant flowers. There were charcoal sketches of a homeless man curled up asleep by a subway grate, the light casting shadows over his agonizing wrinkles. A child crying on a street corner, face in hands. And near the end, a charcoal sketch, utilizing brilliant shading techniques, depicting an old woman sitting on a stone bench, and a few feet away, a skinny dog looking at breadcrumbs. There were no boundaries between wealth and poverty in that drawing, only two souls touching each other. Eleanor's eyes lingered on that sketch for a long time. "You're an orphan who aged out of the foster system, aren't you?" Eleanor asked abruptly, her eyes still glued to the page. having flipped back to the cover where a social services stamp was crossed out. Katie flinched, her jaw clenching. Her defenses instantly shot up. Eleanor closed the book and looked straight at Katie. For the first time, she shed her polite, elegant shell. People look at me and only see wealth. My husband was a tycoon. I own a townhouse on Fifth Avenue so large that even a footstep creates a chilling echo. But I have no one, Katie. The people who visit me just roll their eyes at the expensive paintings on the walls and calculate how much they'll be worth when I close my eyes for good. My wealth is a gilded cage. That park and that stray dog are the only things that make me feel like I am actually communicating with a living, unpretentious being. She took a deep breath, gesturing to the lawyer standing in the corner of the room. The man stepped forward, placing a thick envelope on the table. That dog chose you because he smelled the loneliness. He knows you're just like him, and just like me. The invisible ones. Inside this envelope is a check for $50,000. It's enough for you to rent a nice apartment, buy warm clothes, and live decently for a few years. Katie looked at the envelope, an amount she hadn't ever dared to dream of. But instead of crying tears of gratitude, Katie's eyes darkened. Her chest burned as if she had just been slapped across the face. Memories of fake foster families, people who fed her just to collect government subsidy checks, rushed back. She took a step back, her voice steely and icy. You think your few dollars can buy me? You think I saved you just waiting to be rewarded like a dog begging for a scrap? Katie, I didn't mean. I don't need your pity, Katie snapped, snatching the sketchbook from Eleanor's hands, shooting a glare of contempt at the lawyer. Keep your money and go build some more gilded cages. Next time you fall in the park, tell this lawyer to go pick up your corpse. With that, Katie grabbed her backpack, spun around, and slammed the hospital room door shut behind her, leaving Eleanor stunned in silence. A week passed. Katie returned to her daily grind. She was still hungry, still cold, and still having to dodge and hide from scrapyard owners trying to shortchange her. But her pride wouldn't allow her to regret refusing that check. Saturday afternoon, while sitting outside a convenience store eating half a stale loaf of bread, her grouchy landlord threw a thick, mailed envelope at her face. Katie frowned and opened it. Inside, there was no check. There was only a second sketchbook, brand new, filled with the most expensive, high-quality art paper. And a handwritten letter in royal blue fountain pen ink, the penmanship shaky but elegant. Katie, I apologize for my unintentional arrogance that day. The habit of using money to solve the upper class's problems blinded me, and I insulted your pride. You had every right to be angry. However, the reason I am writing this letter is not to offer further apologies. I write to you as an art curator. My husband left behind over 3,000 paintings and manuscripts that need to be restored and cataloged for a museum. In your charcoal drawing, the way you handled the shadows, chiaroscuro, beneath the oak canopy, demonstrates an innate understanding of light that art students spend years trying to learn. You don't paint with your hands, you paint with empathy. I do not do charity. I am hiring an art assistant with a proper salary and sponsoring that person for a spot at the Pratt Institute. If you think you are capable, come to the address on the envelope on Monday at 9 a.m. Do not let your talent rot in a garbage dump. Signed, Eleanor Vance. Katie read the letter 3 times over. The first tear, after years of suppression, fell and blurred the ink on the word empathy. For the first time in her life, she wasn't viewed as a social burden or a beggar. She was seen as a human being of value. 2 months later. Spring had begun to touch New York, chasing away the bitter cold of winter. Inside the sun-drenched garden behind the Vance townhouse on Fifth Avenue, a completely different picture was being painted. Eleanor, now rosy-cheeked and much healthier, sat on a plush rattan chair, taking a sip of Earl Grey tea, watching with a smile. Katie, wearing an apron splattered with vibrant acrylics, sat cross-legged on the lush green grass. In front of her wasn't an easel, but a dirt-colored, furry creature. The process of winning over that stray dog was nothing like a cheap, easy cinematic miracle. When Katie and Eleanor first returned to the park to find him, he still ran away in terror. He had lost his faith for too long to be healed in a single day. Katie didn't force him. She used the patience of someone who had suffered deep trauma to deal with him. Every afternoon, after finishing work at Eleanor's gallery, she went to the park. She didn't bring food to lure him. She only brought her easel, sat 60 feet away, ignored him, and painted. On the first day, he barked aggressively. On the third day, he lay still under a tree and watched her. By the second week, Katie was so exhausted she fell asleep on the grass. When she woke up, she found a muddy paw print gently stamped on the corner of her scratch paper. He had come to sniff her while she slept. And the deciding day was an afternoon when a sudden thunderstorm rolled in. Thunder cracked across the sky. The dog, harboring a deep psychological terror of loud noises, panicked and cowered under an oak tree, shaking violently. Katie didn't rush over to hug him. She just slowly walked over, knelt on the soaking wet grass 2 feet away, and spread her arms wide in the pouring rain. "I'm right here," she said softly, ignoring the rain streaming down her face. "You don't have to run anymore. I'm right here." In that moment, the dog looked at her. He saw the eyes that had walked with him through the dark to find this woman. Step by step, dragging his paws and trembling, he slowly stepped out of his hiding place, inching toward Katie's open arms. Finally, he buried his head into her chest, let out a long sigh, and squeezed his eyes shut. The surrender of a wanderer who had finally found home. "What are you going to name him?" Eleanor's voice called out, pulling Katie back to reality in the sunlit garden. Katie smiled, running her hand through the dog's now clean, glossy coat. He was chewing on a bone-shaped toy, occasionally looking up to lick Katie's cheek. She looked at the brand-new leather collar around his neck. "Scout, ma'am," Katie replied, her eyes sparkling with a smile. "Because he found us in the dark." Eleanor nodded in deep contentment. She looked at the talented assistant she now treated like a granddaughter, then at the dog who had saved her life. The massive townhouse behind her was no longer a cold, gilded cage. Laughter and conversation had replaced the chilling echoes. In a city of millions, where people rush and trample over each other just to survive, 3 invisible, shattered pieces of life had finally found each other. It wasn't a coincidence of fate. It was because one of them chose not to give up. Another chose to cast aside her pride to recognize true value, and one chose to stop in the dead of winter to listen to a desperate bark for help.